Hello, or moin moin, as we say here in northern Germany. Welcome. My name is John Goodyear, and I'm broadcasting to you from my home office here in Oldenburg. For the past 2.5 years, I've been on a journey to find out about the cultural history of Oldenburg's globe, a British Army cinema built to entertain troops stationed here in the 1950s. This research project is part of efforts of the Globe Cinema and Theatre Trust, the Globe Kulturgenossenschaft in German, to help save, rescue, renovate the Globe and bring it back to life. A picture of which you can see behind me on the screen. Now, coronavirus, of course, has had a major impact on this research project. It's no longer possible to visit those eyewitnesses, or those Zeitzeugen in German, to visit them at their homes in the UK and to conduct interviews, and for them to retell those Globe stories and take a trip back down memory lane. It's impossible, not least because anyone serving in the British Army in Oldenburg in the 1950s would be over the age of 80 today, and of course are at risk to COVID-19. And yet, with the wonders of technology, with Zoom from the comfort of my home office here in Oldenburg, I bring you a number of firsts for this research project today. It's the first interview with an eyewitness we're conducting online, digitally. It's a first in the sense it's the first woman who experienced Oldenburg's globe at first hand back in the 1950s. And it's the first in the sense that it's an individual who went to the globe as a teenager. Her father served on the Donnerschwee barracks, known in English as the barracks, as it was winding down in the mid to late 1950s. I'm delighted to welcome Ann Howard from Suffolk to the interview today. Hello, Ann.
Hello, John. I'm so pleased to be able to be interviewed by you. I didn't realise that I was such an important person.
Oh, you're very important, Ann. Could you tell us, Ann, just to get started, so what's your name, date of birth, and where were you born?
Right, my name's Ann Howard, nee Cooke, with an E, and I was born in January 1940, and I was born actually in Brighton on the south coast, but was only there for 2 weeks because my parents lived in London at the time. My father then joined the army during the war in the August of 1940, and he then served for 20 years as a padre in the British Army.
What are your childhood memories of life, Ann, specifically in Germany? Because your father obviously was right around the world, but you yourself, were you brought here at a very young age? And if so, what was that age?
Oh, my father was posted in 1953, although I stayed with my sister at a boarding school in UK because he was unaware of a secondary school. And when we got here to Germany, wow, the houses were superb. We had central heating, which we certainly didn't have in UK. The houses had a cellar. They had an attic where we used to play, and it was just a delight to live in these lovely houses.
What about your own conditions as a child? So it was great to live in those houses. What was it like being a child here in Germany, specifically here in Oldenburg at the time?
In Oldenburg, I wasn't a child really. I was a later teenager.
Okay.
So it was a little bit different to the posting that we had prior to Oldenburg. But we really didn't have any animosity or anything with the German people as they were. We did a lot of mixing as a family with German people, because my father's if you like profession allowed him to help at churches, etc., within the German community. So he was quite well known, and we were always encouraged to join in, and that was delightful.
Thank you. That's really, really interesting to hear. Now, I said children before because you, of course, you weren't a child, you were a teenager, as I said in my intro, but you have a sister, don't you?
I do, who is 6 years or 6.5 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. And she went to the primary school in Oldenburg for 2 terms. Mm-hmm. But before that, she was 3 years at a primary school at what they call BFES, British Forces Education Service. It was run by them. And she just enjoyed having 3 years at the primary school without having to move on. So yes, I have got a sister.
What's your name of your sister?
Elizabeth.
So Elizabeth, and her surname today?
Is Hughes.
So it's Elizabeth
yes.
Hughes. And perhaps at some point...
And she lives in North Wales.
Oh, okay. What does Elizabeth remember? Obviously, you probably talked to Elizabeth about it. We'll get it at some point from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yes.
What's Elizabeth's memories of her time here in Oldenburg?
In Oldenburg was that she could walk everywhere. We lived very close to the barracks, just outside the barracks, and she could walk to school, walk to church, and strangely enough, walk to the cinema, which was really interesting. But to go into town, it was a much longer walk, and we would have to go in Father's staff car, which was a little Volkswagen.
Oh, really? Yeah. Let's talk about your father for a moment, and then we'll return back to the Globe, to the cinema in a few moments' time. Tell us a little bit more about what your father's role was on the Donnerschwee barracks in Oldenburg, Anne.
I would suggest that he was, it was more in the way of a pastoral setup for the church, because he had to, it was all for Christians, but it was all for Methodist, Roman Catholic, because you only had one padre at any one time in with a regiment. Mm-hmm. So that was his role, and to conduct at the Garrison Church the services every Sunday.
And talking about this Garrison Church, this was a church presumably on the site of the Donnerschwee on the Kreia barracks, is that right?
Yes, correct, yes.
What's your recollections of going there, Anne? Can you remember the building? Because I think the building is no longer there today. So what did it look like?
I honestly can't remember anything, John, on that side of things. I did spend 3 or 4 months at the end of the year. We were there for the whole of 1957 in Oldenburg. But I was really, as a teenager, 17 at the time, I wasn't too worried about what my father was doing. I was more concerned about myself.
Yeah, you're getting to that age, aren't you?
Yes.
Were you quite rebellious, Anne, as a teenager, being a 17-year-old teenager in Oldenburg?
Not really, because I had to be I was the eldest of 3 girls, and I had to look after my sisters. So I was more of the follow the rules. I didn't. I tried not to get away with too much.
Yeah, okay. Talk a little bit about your educational background. So if I've understood this correctly, you're now in Oldenburg. It's 1950, did you say 57?
Correct.
Yeah, so 1957 in Oldenburg. Your sister is going to the Oldenburg Primary School, and yourself, where were you going to school, Anne?
I was at the King Alfred School at Plön in Schleswig-Holstein.
But that's quite a distance, isn't it, from Oldenburg?
Yeah, so we would have the school train, which went from the British side or zone of Germany. There were 2 trains, and I can't remember the one whether we were A or B train, but that took us up at the beginning of and brought us home at the end of term. So it was a nice and it was delightful. I was very, very happy there.
Could you tell us a little bit more about Plön? Because I'm guessing that people watching this video today, they're obviously interested in the Globe Cinema, but they would also be interested in your life here as a teenager, you know, becoming an adult, entering adulthood. What was that time like in Plön? Can you explain it to us?
Well, that was lovely because it was a co-ed comprehensive boarding school, and so therefore we were mixing with the opposite sex quite a bit, but as one of our masters told us afterwards, that nobody left the school pushing a pram, which I think was quite a nice way of saying that we behaved ourselves.
So if I've understood this correctly too, your school term would have been obviously there in Plön, and then during the holidays you would have returned back to Oldenburg and stayed with your family here
Correct.
in Oldenburg. So that's when you would have seen your sister again, you would have seen your father and
yes, and I had also my sister, who was in the middle, 3 years, nearly 3 years younger than me. She and I would be on the train together.
Oh, okay.
So,
could you explain this train journey to us in a little more detail? And where did you get on the train? Was it couldn't have been a direct train from Oldenburg all the way to Plön? That's not possible, is it?
Well, I honestly can't remember that side of it. I don't ever remember leaving the train to get on another one.
Okay, so
it must have gone because we had quite a lot to do in Bremen, I think.
Ah, okay.
So it was quite an easy journey. It wasn't too long, whereas some people were coming from sort of Mönchengladbach, and that was a much longer journey, and they would have sandwiches supplied.
Fabulous. Fabulous. And once you got back, and thinking of a 17-year-old teenager now in Oldenburg back from school, what was it like to be back in Oldenburg? What sort of things did you get up to?
Well, basically, it was going to the cinema.
Really?
There wasn't very much to do other than having to ask for a lift into town, and my German was very limited, so I really didn't, because it was a forces school. We didn't speak German. We had German teachers, but they all wanted to learn English, which was rather nice. So we really didn't have, as I say, the English are so lazy with their language that I'm afraid we got by very, very easily. But generally, it was pretty boring, other than the cinema.
Yeah. So you have a picture. You have a picture, don't you, Anne, of the town centre as it would have looked. Now, could you tell us where you got this picture from?
I got it out of my father's information. He was quite he liked to collect things and to stick things in books, etc. And we've kept some of them, not all of his things, right. But I have an archive of his early years as a coming to be a priest and as a scout. He was very much part of the scout movement, and so he has got this book which he had as what he called his intercessions, which was for people that he would pray for each day. And the Oldenburg people come out on the 23rd of every month, it used to be.
Okay.
He put them down in number order as we had gone to different places for his postings. So if you like, I would show you.
Yeah, put that on the screen so that so there we go. That's the city centre of Oldenburg. We can see that very well. Those people that are familiar with Oldenburg will know that building to the left extremely well. In lockdown Oldenburg, I cycled past there about a week ago, and it was absolutely deserted. So there's considerably more activity in that picture than there is today in lockdown Oldenburg. Right. Yeah, but on a normal day, that would be a very busy part of town. Thank you very much for that, Anne. That's fabulous, fabulous. So you would have gone down to town. What would you have done? Walk around town, walk around the
yes,
the
and bought a few things, but generally we had baths. You know, British Army Forces sterling.
Yeah.
So
Vouchers, I think they were, weren't they?
Yes. And so that was all on the barracks. So we had to ask mother and father for marks if we wanted to do anything. So, but we did have some pocket money.
Okay. And with these baths, obviously you couldn't go out into the Oldenburg town centre we're coming up to the mid to late 50s and spend this money, because obviously it's not legal tender outside of the barracks.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. How did you get these baths then, Anne? Were they just given to you as school children from the army? No,
I assumed that they were from my my mother and father, and he would be paid, or he would get baths and then have to have them converted to marks.
Right, okay.
So I wouldn't know. I mean, it's like anybody living at home, you know, all of a sudden you say, "Can I have some money, Daddy?" And you hope that he says yes.
Is there anything that you bought, Anne, with these German marks that you might have given your baths in and got your marks back, that you still have today?
No, I'm looking at 60 years ago, and I really can't remember, John.
And I suppose as teenagers, you don't sort of buy and collect those sorts of things.
No, and you're looking at maybe a nice pair of shoes or something like that. Sure. But we weren't we didn't have a lot of money.
What are your recollections of the city centre of Oldenburg in terms of how it looked and how people were and how they behaved towards you?
I don't think they behaved. I wouldn't know. Somehow, as a child or as a youngster, you're quite happy to talk to anybody and everybody. And because my father, or we had been as a family in East Africa and North Africa prior to coming to Oldenburg, you learn to live with whoever is there.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy, but that's we were lucky that we had been introduced to all different cultures, etc., during our life, really.
Talking of that, and so you're in this community of English-speaking people. Can you recall any of your mates, any of your friends? You got any sort of names in your head of people that you know and still know today, that you talk about these experiences with?
Well, with my old school pals,
okay.
We have a reunion every year.
Right.
So we're all in our 70s, 80s, because the school closed in 1959. Mm-hmm. So there are no youngsters coming along, but we have on average about 100 people every January in London.
Really?
And it's always been at the same time every year, for the simple reason that the British Army would have a block leave at Christmas time. Mm-hmm. They'd come over and spend Christmas and New Year with their families, and then they would be required to go back. So it was always the first Saturday in January.
Right.
For the reunion. But
so you had one this year before this coronavirus?
Yes, we did.
Oh, how many people showed up?
Oh, there was, I think it was 101. Then, I mean, and I have to say the web has really helped. The internet, we're getting people now, because people are now retiring, or they've got time, and maybe lockdown will produce a few more, because they decide to look up and see. And we've got a very good website with a very good guy who used to be at the school looking after it, because he was in computer sciences all the way through his working life. So we have a very, very active website, which is good.
Perhaps we can upload this interview after it's completed and onto that website, so people can hear of your experiences.
I'm sure they could, yes.
That's
and most
fabulous.
of them know me because I've end up on reception welcoming everybody.
So you're the face. You're very much
Yeah,
the face
that
of the.
everybody knows but never talks to.
Let's come back to Oldenburg now, and you've spoken. You've touched on the cinema. Obviously, as I started this interview today, I mentioned that I'm researching the Globe Cinema. We had a picture on the screen as we got underway. Tell us a little bit about your recollections globally of the Globe Cinema and Theatre in Oldenburg.
Well, the Globe Cinema for the barracks and for the families was an absolute godsend, because there was very little else for us to do other than maybe some sports. I mean, I play netball and things, but other than that, there was very little entertainment. So they had fantastic shows, and they changed the films, whereas in these days in cinemas they have it for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes good ones. They were changing them every 2 or 3 days, and
Right.
they would during, I think the cinema opened in the afternoons, sort of late afternoons, and then you had a rolling thing. So you would automatically, if you got in halfway through a film, you could sit there. You didn't get turfed out.
I see.
You could stay there and then see the beginning part that you missed, and maybe stay on if you wanted to. So it was sort of like a rolling projection for the whole evening.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked well.
So you went there as a teenager, and did you take your sister with you?
My sister would go on her own, because by this time
Really?
she was 10, coming up 11, and my father used to look through. We got a little leaflet, a little A4 divided into 3, and it would give you a list of all for the whole month, and he would say which ones she could go to see.
So pretty much censoring and parental control.
Yes, censors at home. I was allowed to go and see over 12. And also I had to make sure that I got enough money as well, because they used to pay me a little bit of money in Oldenburg as I was there waiting to come back to UK and start my nurse training. I got 15 shillings for helping with the cleaning at home.
Oh, so your parents gave you a bit of pocket money to
do the housework, to help my mother do the housework.
And then you would invest that money into tickets to go to the cinema.
Oh yes, most definitely.
Oh, and this is brilliant. Could you describe the cinema for us? What are your recollections of how the cinema looked? How you have it in your memory? I know we're talking here a good 60 years.
I know. Basically, I can't remember I never went down the front of the cinema, but there was always an usherette.
Oh, is a woman?
Yes.
Okay. Was she young or old?
She was a local lady. I can't remember talking to anybody particularly, but it would have been, I'm sure, a local lady with her torch, because it was always dark, because they never it had a rolling, as I was explaining. Yeah. So she would then see you. There were no seats, numbered seats. Mm-hmm. You used to just get told that you can go in there. There's one just a few places in, and she would pop you there. So she was the one who allocated really the seats as you came in. And sorry.
Yeah, talking about coming in, and so that's as you've gone into the actual auditorium itself, you found your seat. What about prior to coming in? You said you bought these tickets. How did you buy them? Did you have to wait in this long queue, or did you buy them in advance?
There never seemed to be much of a queue, really.
Okay.
And you would go to the box office. There's a little booth there.
Was that in
And
the centre, or was that in actually sort of built into the
I
walls?
can't remember,
I can't
John,
remember
to be
that. Okay.
honest.
No worries.
But we used to pay by our baths.
Yeah.
And then we would take our ticket and go in, and the usherette would see us at the door, check our tickets, and then show us to a seat somewhere that was free.
And then you'd be in the cinema. What were your feelings inside this sort of auditorium, presumably surrounded by men, young army men,
yes,
or was it a mixture?
You're used to that anyway.
Okay.
You really are. When you live on barracks and things, it's part and parcel of your normal life, really. So
before the films got underway, and let's say you got in there before the films started, can you remember if I don't know if music was played, or were they things on the screen?
Well, it was nearly always dark because of the it just was continuous. You would have and if you wanted to get in, you would see a trailer.
Oh, really? Okay.
Trailers involved. I don't remember many adverts as you get today. And then we would have a B film. There would be a short, sort of like a documentary or something for about an hour. Then you would get the news, Pathé News. Okay. And then after that, you would get the main film.
This is now 60 years, and I appreciate this is a long period of time. And can you remember any news items that you remember because they were sort of, you have these big events in the world that happen? I know you're 17, it's a long time ago. You remember anything that might have happened in 1957?
I would be cheating if I could have gone. I could have gone on to to 1957 and seen, but I honestly can't remember.
No, that's fine because it's a long time ago.
It's only certain things I think you remember in life where you were at for instance, when Kennedy was assassinated. I could tell you exactly where I was and when I heard the news. So no, I couldn't, honestly.
What about films? Can you remember any films that you might have seen?
Well, I remember going to see African Queen with Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn. But generally, there was lots of musicals that we enjoyed going to see. But we were girls, and to go and see Carousel, Oklahoma, all the ones that you can now see on the film channels these days.
Yeah, sure. The ones that are repeated at Christmas.
Yeah, it doesn't cost them anything. So, but those are the type of things that we would go to see. But African Queen, I remember vividly, because it was slightly different. It wasn't a musical, and I
mean, looking back at this, and we doing this interview, obviously, well over 6 decades after the events itself. So you're going to the cinema. What sort of feeling would a teenager have, considering that you don't have, presumably you didn't have a television at home, did you?
No.
So there's no television. You've probably got a wireless.
Yes, we did have a radio.
Wireless. Yes, you've got a radio.
Radio Caroline was very good.
Okay, we'll talk about that actually in a bit more detail in a moment's time. But what's the feeling of a teenager that doesn't necessarily have the entertainment that we have today? I've got this sort of huge screen behind me that 6 decades ago, was very much something that was in the future. What sort of feeling was this going to the cinema in your holiday time, in your spare time?
Well, that was the highlight of your day, and you would get dressed up to go there.
Okay, so it was an event.
Of course, yes, because you had to pay out money for that. But generally, we would be playing Monopoly and things like this at home in the evenings more so. Where we didn't have television then.
Do you think you cherish those moments more than obviously today, where it's just overconsumption of all sorts of digital impulses and media at you? Do you think that the appreciation was perhaps a bit higher?
Possibly, yes. It's difficult to remember really, because all I was really wanting to do was to get back and start my my nurse training at the age of 18. which I would have been in the January.
Yeah.
And we went all the way down to Plymouth after leaving Oldenburg.
Tell me, did your father ever go to the cinema?
Oh, he probably went to see The Robe or something like that.
Right.
But I don't remember. No, he wasn't a great, because he would have a lot of evening meetings.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because there would be, you know, the men would be working during the day or exercising and things. And so anything, because he nearly always had scouts, he would always start a scout troop. But I'm not sure that he did in Oldenburg. He wasn't going to be there long enough.
Okay.
But there was nearly always things like the Women's Institute or sort of the women type Mothers Union, that sort of thing in the during the week in the evenings. So our house was often used quite a lot by other people. So we got used to having lots of social interaction with people and Germans as well. But
really?
they weren't. They were people that were part of the barracks, probably the civilians who worked there and things.
So if I've understood this correctly, your father would you say a padre?
Yes.
Yeah, so your father was
chaplain.
a padre, chaplain, working on site, but you live off-site. You live off the barracks, is that right?
Only just in the quarters, the married quarters that were.
That's contained within the actual barracks itself?
Well, you're sort of, but you walk to get into the barracks. They had a gate to get in.
Okay, yeah. So in other words, you're outside this gate, but it's very close, in close proximity to the actual compound itself.
Absolutely.
Can you remember going through that gate or what sort of precautions were taken? Because anyone could just sort of walk through, but this is a military installation, is it? Where you check for do you have to show some identification? Because
no.
to get to the cinema, you'd have to go through that gate.
No, we didn't seem to have to do that at all.
Okay.
I can't remember ever having to do that, but whether Father came with us or not and just saw us to the gate and then we went in, but I think they got to know us because we would go probably every week.
I suppose you don't suspect children, do you, as spies coming to spy on whatever's going on in the barracks?
You know, we didn't have all this technology and television that allowed you to have vivid imaginations.
So when you went on to the barracks, and presumably this is, you know, late afternoon, early evening, there would have been people milling around with their uniforms on, but there would have been people too who were in civilian clothing. Was it a mixture or was it predominantly sort of military uniform?
It was predominantly military, but then they all look very similar. Yeah, so sure. when they've got their suits on, they've still got short hair and no beards.
And predominantly male.
And also it was very safe because the cinema was just inside the barracks, so you knew they were all to do with the British Army, really.
Yeah. And in the cinema itself, to come back to the moment, I'm going from one thing to the other, but so following your conversation, the actual individuals in the cinema, can you remember individuals wearing their military uniform or were they wearing civilian clothing?
Oh no, there was a mixture. There was a mixture of both.
Yeah.
But we never wore trousers. That was just not part of a girl's or a woman's attire in those days. You always had to have a skirt on or a dress, and stockings for me it used to be with a suspender belt, and my sister would be in socks. So, but you never wore trousers. No, that wasn't. Only wore trousers or shorts really for exercising on the field or sports field really.
Did you do many sports, Anne?
I did as a yes, hockey, netball, tennis. I even I played cricket when I was in England, but it was mainly netball and hockey, and we would.
And that was not just at school in Plön, but did you do any sports in Oldenburg? Can you remember?
I think I played netball.
Okay.
Not hockey, but there was netball, because I think they had it at the primary school.
Right.
That's all I can. I would say, but I can't. Please don't.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So you might have done, but it's
I
not.
might
It's
have
not
done.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I've just thought of another question that's really important for the context of my research. And can you remember the national anthem being played in the Globe?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Always. At the end of the film,
right.
and with a bit of luck, you could get out before all the credits finished.
Right.
Because once the credits are finished, then so if there was a lot of people there, you sometimes had to stay, and of course we all had to stand.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And then walk out.
And those in military uniform, did they salute?
No, because they didn't have their caps on.
Oh, okay.
They would have their berets off. You have to take your berets off when you go inside anywhere.
Other than the usherette that you spoke about, was that was presumably a different person who would have sold the tickets to you?
Yes.
Was that a German or a British person? Was it
male
or female?
It would be German.
Oh, really?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was.
And did you ever get to see the cinema manager?
Oh, no, I wouldn't know who he was.
No. So no, sort of all in the background.
Yes. But it was more or less staffed by Germans, and the projectionist was, I think, probably German as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because it was giving work that we did. Yes, for the local people, and it was a way of integrating and because it was getting towards the end of our if you like, occupation as such. So it was a way of handing things back.
That's a very interesting observation, Anne. Very interesting observation. When you spoke about the German members of staff, it would appear as if they played some sort of role in this cinema. What about English people? Were there any English members of staff that may have played a role? Can you remember of any or not?
No, I can't, honestly.
That's not a problem.
Because the officers' mess or the messes would they had things going on for the men generally, but we would be allowed to go at the weekends if we were invited. And I can't remember. Sometimes it was the army not the army air corps, the army catering corps would be there to if you like, as waiters for the drinks behind the bar. But I would imagine that the cooks and things that were doing the food would have been Germans. Yeah.
Other than films, Anne, staying with the Globe Cinema, can you remember any other performances or something to do with singing or other cultural activities that took place in the Globe? So exclusively films?
No, exclusively films, yes. And it was every month we got another programme of what they were going to show for that month.
Were there any other methods of advertising for films? So quite clearly the main source of information about what's going on at the cinema is this A4 folded brochure, as you said. Were there any other ways that films were advertised?
Thinking when you talk about it, that it would be on the outside of the cinema.
Okay.
A reasonable poster, because all the large film companies, didn't they? They would send posters for people, but I can't. I honestly wouldn't know other than that. It was just something that was at home for us to peruse for thinking what we're going to do next month. Oh, look forward to it.
Yeah. So quite clearly, the from what you're saying, based on that observation, these things are happening on a monthly rota. So
Yeah.
they seem to be planned monthly, and then the next leaflet would come out monthly.
Yep, correct.
So it's a monthly
schedule. There was nothing much else for the troops to do either, other than in their messes. You know, there were the three usually: the officers, sergeants, and the NCOs.
For those people who aren't familiar with the military and some of our German listeners, could you just explain the concept of the mess to us? What is that?
Well, that's where they would live. The officers certainly would. Bachelor officers would have a room there, and then they were given food and drinks. Obviously, there was a bar. It was a sort of like a social club.
Okay, yeah, that's a very nice way of putting it.
I don't think the for the sergeants and the NCOs, which is non-commissioned officers, they would be housed or live. Their bedrooms and things would be in another part of the barracks.
What about people that actually served on those barracks? Do you have any names that you might remember or you have written down? I think you've got a document there, haven't you, Ann?
Yes, I have. My father wrote some of the people that were particularly applicable as far as his work and the families are concerned, who were obviously fairly good churchgoers as well as anything else. But I can show you that.
Yeah, put that up onto the screen. So we're seeing here a list of names. Yes, we can see that beautifully, and that's we've actually practiced this. So Ann's doing a fantastic job at what we call in teaching chesting. She's sort of chesting here this list of individuals. Do you want to read those names for us, Ann? So people might be listening. So who's on that list?
Charles and Mary Gilbert.
Mm-hmm.
Eunice and Peter Howard Horwood. That's a thing. Excuse me, I need my other glasses.
Yeah, not a problem, man.
You've caught me there.
I've caught you off guard. Yeah, you got your other glasses on. That's good.
Dennis Dewhurst, Michael and Paula Leahy, Stanley and Evelyn Francis, John Pears, Bill and Mary Duncan, John Smith, David Charles Edwards. Oh, that's an interesting one, because he's a double-barreled name. And when they all line up, the troops, and they all have to say who they are, they all have to go, their names. And he went, Charles Edwards, and he said, only your surname. And he said, well, anyway, that's just an army joke, really. Edgar Gapper, Brian Bishop, Arthur Perry, Leonard Ford, Marley Friedman, and Vera Fairlam. So those are the ones I've got.
Do you remember any of those faces, Ann?
I remember the Charles Edwards, David Charles Edwards, because he was he I think went into the church eventually, but he would help my father at the communion service. I remember him particularly. But would you like to see a photo of my father?
Yes, why not? That's very nice.
At the time.
So that's your father, and who's that standing next to him?
And he is escorting the Princess Royal out of the Garrison Church.
And that's in Oldenburg?
I am not sure whether it was, and I think, no, it's not in Oldenburg.
Oh, it's not in Oldenburg. We'll talk a little bit about what happened to you after Oldenburg in a moment's time. You said about the cinema, the army cinema, being there because there was nothing else there. Do you think it had any other purpose? And the Globe Cinema, what do you think the purpose of it was?
I think it helped to give a little bit of flavour of UK and what was happening back in Blighty, if you like.
Yeah, sure.
I think that was basically the idea of it, because and to keep the troops happy, besides playing football and rugby that they all have to do to keep themselves fit. It was a relaxing type thing, and they got something to write home about, to say that they'd seen this, or somebody back in UK would say, we've seen this film, if you get a chance to see it, do. Because we still weren't very much a television area.
Yeah. That comes a bit later, doesn't it?
Yeah, people were gradually getting there. But we still had the radio, and could get most of it. And of course we had the British Forces Broadcasting service. That's something that we wanted to have a chat about too. So outside of the cinema, so entertainment within the globe is films, but you come back home and yes, and the wireless, as you would have called it, or the radio. So what do you remember listening to on the radio when you were the radio? It was mainly the British Forces Broadcasting Service, and they would have a lot of what do you call them? Oh, I've lost my word now. What do you do when you write it? Send a letter in to choices. Oh yeah, So you send in a request. Yeah, thank you. That's the request. There you go. There you go. It's the age, Don't worry, Anne, you're doing very well. There was yes, the requests would go in, and you could listen to those. They would have quite a lot of those. Oh, okay. But then there was music while you work. Those sort of there's still were going then, and the home service and the light program. Did you ever send a request in yourself, and you say, "Oh, I'd like to listen to this piece of music"? No, I don't think so. No, you didn't. And your sister? Knowledge. No, I don't think so. No. I don't remember them saying anything, but my mother and father would listen to the home service rather than okay. Or the world service. I suppose that's also an education, isn't it? If you've been posted on all of these places all around the world, so you mentioned East Africa, I think you mentioned North Africa, did you, earlier on? Yes, we were. Yeah. We were in Libya. So you were in Libya. That was before Oldenburg? Yes. Yeah. So in Libya, so North Africa, were you in East Africa? Yes, we were in Eritrea. Oh, were you really? And that was all before Oldenburg? Yes. Yep. And then you came to Oldenburg, that was 1957. Do you know the exact date or month that you arrived? Well, I went back to school in the January, and when we came back for our Easter holidays, mother and father were at Oldenburg. Okay. And then how long were they there in Oldenburg? Until the December. Only for one full year. Right. And I came back with them because we had a car then, and we had to bring the car back to UK, to the Harwich. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I know that crossing very well. Yes, we used to do it. When I think about it, we did it as, well, I was probably 11, 12. My sister was 9 or 10. And the two of us we got off the train, onto the boat, slept in the cabin that was allocated to us, and then out. And there was always British transport people to see us onto the train for wherever we were going. It was an army sort of base there. And this was without your parents? Yeah. Oh, no, because father and mother were in Germany, you see. Oh, yes. So these days you think, oh, gosh, did we really do that? I suppose it's a sense of safety and security that the army then also offers you as you're part of that group, that unit, I suppose. Yes, you are, really. And they would, they would organise the cabin and things for us, I assume. I would doubt if father did that.
Yeah. What about your mother? You've spoken a lot about your father. He was a padre. What was your mother's role while she was in Oldenburg in 1957, or even beforehand?
Supporting my father, giving him his meals when he wanted them, and generally having coffee mornings with the local people. Well, not the local people, the wives and things.
Sure,
they had their own little social circle, really.
And was that very active, Anne?
I think so, but when we were in Oldenburg, because we were that much older. My mother didn't have a maid that we'd had before in Germany. It was, I think, whether it was just only for the year or something, I don't know. But also, they started to learn German. They had their records for well, what do they call it? Can you? What they
Schallplatten is the German for record.
No, they were a special company who used to do all these teach yourself. Yes,
okay.
they would
So
like
self-didactic.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, if anyone knows that, they are happy to get in contact with either yourself and or myself. At the end of our little interview, we're slowly coming to the end of our interview. We'll put our email addresses up on the screen.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So coming to now the end of your time in Oldenburg in 1957, this is a long time ago, and what happened when you left? So you left, you returned to the UK. What happened to you, your family, mom and dad, your sister then?
Well, my sister had left Oldenburg in the September to attend a boarding school back in UK. Or both my sisters, the two sisters, they went off in September, and I was there on my own with my mother, and then I travelled with them in the car to via Harwich, and my father was then posted to Plymouth.
I see. Okay.
So he went there, and that was his final posting before leaving the army in 1960.
What did you do after the army?
He was in a parish near Reading, a very nice parish there. Then he went. He was there for 4 years. Then he went to Baghdad, to St. George's Church in Baghdad.
Did you go to Baghdad as
well?
No.
Well, I went there, but only as a. By this time, I was married and I had a little baby, and took this 8-month-old over to Baghdad. And his mission there was to go to all these different places: Basra, Mosul, and all the different Mosul. I think it's called Mosul.
Yeah, Mosul. Yeah, Mosul in the north of the country. Kirkuk. Yeah.
And so we were able to go with him because nobody worried about women. So we would go around with him. So I was there for just over a month, and my youngest sister went as well. We all went eventually, and then he came back to UK another 4 years as a vicar, and then he spent his last ministry days as active before retiring in Libya. He went back to Libya.
What an amazing story.
He was an interesting guy.
And not only that, and I think the story of your father also encapsulates this idea of the word globe. That the globe, of course, is a cinema, but at the same time, it's been given a name. It's got a lot to do with Shakespeare, of course, with the Globe Cinema in London. But at the same time, it's the idea that there are stations all around the globe. It somehow reflects that. And if there's a globe in Oldenburg and there's one in Libya, then automatically you've got this connection.
Yes.
That transcends the local or even the national and becomes very much an international and global idea, but it connects you back to your home.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it was good.
Final note, before I put up email addresses on the the slide in a few moments' time. What do you think, Anne, to this story here in Oldenburg with this Globe cinema here that you visited in 1957 as a teenager, but now has been saved, has been rescued, it's in the process of being renovated, notwithstanding COVID-19. I'm sure once that's out of the way, the renovation work will be underway very, very quickly. But what's your feelings about this as someone who's visited it and it's now being saved by a group of what is volunteers?
I think a fantastic idea, because you cannot stress enough about the history of whether it be a town or a big city. You do need to have recollections of the past, and I think it would make, I don't know, has Oldenburg got a nice concert hall and things already?
Yeah. It got when the Globe was built, it was as far as I'm aware, it was the second largest cinema and theatre in the whole of the city, and it does actually fit well with the size of the others. So it fills a kind of a gap that exists in a medium-sized concert cinema venue.
It's so easy to pull something down and say, oh well, don't need that anymore. But to have something that has got so much history behind it, I think is absolutely amazing. And I was so pleased to be introduced to you. So that,
same here, Anne.
To find that there's somebody who's actually got that at heart to have a go and try and bring it to fruition.
Yeah,
lovely.
So on that note, Anne, what we are going to do is round off our session today. What I'm going to do for those of you watching is I'm going to share both my email and also Anne's email address there on the screen. You should be able to see them now. Can you see them, Anne?
I can.
Yeah, yes. That's good. So I'm sure our viewers will be able to see them. So if you're interested in what you've heard today, if you're interested in the research project that I'm obviously doing on the Globe Cinema and Theatre in Oldenburg, then you can contact me directly. My email address is j.goodyear@bham.ac.uk. Obviously, BHAM is the University of Birmingham. If you're interested in contacting Anne directly, the email address is there, stanhowardberry@btinternet.com. If you'd like to find out more information on the Globe Cinema and Theatre, about the project to save what is the last remaining British Army cinema and theatre in the whole of Germany, then you can visit the website. That's www.globe-oldenburg.de. And if you go onto that site, you can look for other interviews that we've done with eyewitnesses, or as they would say in German, Zeitzeugen, under the headings of Historie, obviously for history, or Forschung, which is the German word for research. On that note, I'm going to thank Anne most sincerely from my home office here in Germany to her in Suffolk in the United Kingdom. This is the first time we've done this, Anne, and I think it's gone according to plan.
Good. Well done, John.
Well done, Anne.
Maybe see you again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the best to you in Suffolk, Anne. Take care.
Thank you very much. And you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.